Hello, and welcome to the Dissidents Podcast, where we talk about how we can strive for a world in which freedom and reason are at the forefront of all human society. This week, Elizabeth is joined by Ryan Tsapatsaris for a discussion about the complex world of online hate communities. While we often assume that attackers are laser focused on their targets and on affecting social change, the evidence suggests that attackers are more interested in themselves and in impressing one another. Ryan shares examples and his knowledge about platforms like 4chan, as well as the dynamics of anonymity and status. We spend time talking about concern trolling, as well as the gamification of cancel culture. Hello, and welcome back to the Dissonance Podcast, where we are having as our guest today Ryan Tsapatsaris. And Ryan has been with us before in a liberal values lab, and so we'll link to that in the podcast notes if you want to go back and visit that. And after we met, I sent Ryan a link to a book that I had read for a whole nother purpose, or skimmed, I guess, for a whole nother purpose. And we sort of been chatting about that and wanted to get to actually chat about that on the podcast. So it's by it's edited by Walther and Rice, and it's called Social Processes of Online Hate. I do think it's a little right-wing focused. They don't talk much about progressive left wing, but so maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I do think it's mostly focused on right wing extremists. One of the things I liked about the book was that was something that they didn't include, which is a focus on personality and sort of blaming the person as opposed to describing the social forces that contribute to sort of creating a community of hate, or a community of haters is one of the things that they talk about. So and that they focus not so much on the targets, and sort of they didn't discuss the deservingness of targets or anything like that. They really just focused on what are some of these social forces that influence people, maybe people who are already vulnerable, either situationally or dispositionally, and what are some of those forces. So that's one of the things that I really liked about it, that maybe this could happen to any of us if we were in that kind of situation, or if we were already vulnerable for some reason. So this is really your area of expertise. This is just it just happened to me, so that's a whole different level. Right. But so we decided beforehand to really focus on what is chapter 11. We can talk about other stuff too, but chapter 11 in this book, which is it Stringini and Blackburn, I think, coordinated aggression as a form of camaraderie, which is the odd sort of So what did you what now I've been done the introductions, and so I sort of feel like you should kind of lead where this conversation goes, because again, you're more of an expert.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, so the chapter we're discussing is about the site platform online 4chan, right? Which, I think to use sort of an internet term, normies, right? People that are on sort of the more mainstream internet may not even be that familiar with.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Right. So in some ways, it is definitely a place where a lot of internet pop culture, potentially more negative aspects of internet pop culture, right, whether it be problematic in some way, do come from, right? I personally, and this is my area of expertise, but I don't know if this is an expert opinion, but I often see it as vaguely as a foil to Reddit, right? Which Reddit itself calls itself the front page of the internet, right? And in some ways does have that sort of news dissemination, not just news, but media dissemination, right? So it is fair, I think, to think of sort of like Reddit as sort of the left progressive version, and 4chan is sort of a bastion of the right. This r/Paul, which is so on Reddit, the structure of Reddit, again, this may be for people who aren't familiar, just very briefly, the structure of Reddit is message boards, primarily anonymous message boards.
Oh.
Some of my research has gone into that. Sorry, that the users are anonymous, right? There are ways that users sort of signal to each other who they are. Some of my research that hasn't published has gone into that, but generally it's best to just think of it as an anonymous message board. People do sort of fight for status on it, the way other internet sites also sort of are status conscious. But as I said, with a bent towards anonymity, it's pretty anonymous, right? And so, yeah, it's a message board system. And, in the article me and Elizabeth read and we're discussing, they talk about a specific sub thread of 4chan, right? There's 4chan's divided into, I actually don't know how many categories. There's about 40 board categories, right? And the article we're talking about focuses on not R. 4. Did I say Reddit? I meant 4chan. I apologize. 4chan. It's slash like backslash / POL, which is short for politics. And we, I have research that I've done, and we can link this after, about how supporters of President Trump worked really hard to maintain narrative supremacy on the board. And so all that to say, researchers have long focused on Paul because of its political bent. And these scholars did as well.
Yeah. So what does it mean to do a crawler? What does that mean?
So I will admit, that's more on the quantitative side. It's a big data sort of collection, right?
Yeah.
I am a qualitative scholar, but
give me the big picture of what does that even mean? How
Right.
did they collect this data?
Right. So they automate. I mean, I actually don't know the technical term from the hardware side, but they automate a program. There's a program that will collect just copious amounts of postings, right? I mean, this type of the technology they use in sort of, they explain this, but is massive in what it catches, right? And that allows them to code massive amounts of data. There is a misconception, and actually the authors say this as well, that all of 4chan is ephemeral and that posts disappear. That is true on the primary platform, but I've noticed in the scholarship, this is never mentioned, but it is all archived. There's a public archive of every post. Cacophonous, difficult to sort through, a bunch of anonymous posts. Right? I'm not saying it's easy to use, but it does hyperlink. I mean, in my own research, I've followed conversations through, right? So it is worth mentioning. There's an ephemerality of 4chan, but if you're looking for researchers, the data is there, and they could crawl the archive as well. So a crawler is just a way of collecting massive amounts of data, really print data in this case, right? Text data.
So they write a program, and then is it like do they enroll like as a user, and then the program kind of like follows people?
So that's a great question. So 4chan, again, with the anonymity, has no structure of users the way Facebook right. So I'm so glad you asked that. That's an important thing I should have mentioned. 4chan is super public in that let me put it this way. You can sign up for an account on 4chan, or at least you used to be able to. That is not how the culture of the site works.
Oh, okay.
People don't, right? People don't use it. So my presumption with their crawler, and I mean, again, this may be in the article, but the presumption is the way that they would do that is they may grab every post on our poll for X period of time. And the crawler allows them to do that, right? The program getting the large quantities is not an issue.
So it's not like they're sneaking in.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
My and co-authors' public work on 4chan was commented on by 4chan users who found it on public. And they told us to quote unquote lurk more, LURK being sort of like some of the lingo. So but no, the researchers, to their credit, are doing nothing sort of shady or even not even remotely questionable. It's completely above board. This is all public.
Okay. So one of the interesting things, and maybe you found this too, I don't know, that they found was that I think most of us assume when people get attacked or whatever that it's about that whoever's doing the attack, that it really is about the victim to them. That it's about the target. The target must be stopped. The target must be outed. The target, whatever. And that once they achieve their goal, it's like, oh, yay, we stopped that person from, in my case, from, asking a research question about BLM, Black Lives Matter. So we stopped that person cold, and so we're done. it's like, okay, we're done. And maybe we go look for somebody else who's doing something that we also think is bad or whatever. But no, that's not what they found at all. So it seems like what they found was this sort of like feedback loop of celebrating and reminiscing and revisiting. They wanted like, high fives. It's like, remember what I did? They almost like, maybe this is because of an artifact of 4chan that stuff kind of, they think it's going to disappear. They have to keep it alive or
Mhm.
something. I don't know. And then the authors also talked about sort of cross posting to other. And so anyway, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I think you highlight two important things, and I kind of want to separate. The first thing that you mentioned right on was the notion of the not the target, right? There's a ethos on 4chan, and this is from Whitney Phillips. So there's a scholar named Whitney Phillips who's written a couple books, and I would argue, she was one of the big sort of 4chan scholars, right? She sort of brought it to the scholarly mainstream, and I think it's in her book. It might even be in this article, but there's an ethos on 4chan. Ethos on 4chan is known as for the lols, LULZ, a
Okay.
way of saying LOL, right?
Okay.
Doing it for the laughs, and so
Oh.
yeah. So then there's like, so again, it is interesting to compare it to your very sort of ad hominem personal target of what happened in your situation about a research question. You know, whomever your aggressors were did have I would argue, had a very different stated goal, right? I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to social contain, the moment of everyone getting ritual, right? There's so I think that I just wanted to make that, when you said that about the target, because the authors do a good job of that. Like you said, they don't, it's not about the individual. So on part one, we have the people doing it for the lulls, for the sake of, for enjoyment. I want, that's really right. And so I think that feeds into the second thing, the second aspect being that, and later we celebrate it, and later we
Mhm.
brag, right? Because it wasn't, because, and I think again, that's such an, because victory wasn't the goal oftentimes for
Right.
that's what I want to say. Which so, and my work on academic cancel culture, which what happened, you would fall right in that realm. I think the goals, motivations are very different. However, to your point about the social processes, we're all humans, and so that processes is the same. I say this humbly as an academic. That doesn't mean I have a better moral, you know what I mean? Like, we can all get caught up is what I'm trying to say, right? I am no better than, I mean, I don't use the language of the people on 4chan, right? And that is one way maybe I differ from them. But in general, I don't assume that my moral compass is better, right? We all can be taken up in the
We
ritual
all want to
moment.
be liked. Yeah, we all want
Exactly.
to be
Thank you. Yeah.
liked. And we all want to sort of mirror or social norms, whatever the social norms are in our group, we want to demonstrate that we adhere to those or we support them or whatever. And so but after reading this, I went back and looked at, because we took some screenshots of some of what was going on when I was canceled. And after reading this chapter, I'm like, oh my gosh, this really was more. They were saying, oh, good job. You found that person's address. Great job. You found this person's employer, because of my students were attacked too. It's like, oh, you found this person's employer. Great job. Oh, you contacted the newspaper. Wow. So it wasn't about, I would say 3/4 of it wasn't about us. It was about telling each other how awesome of a job they were doing in condemning us or whatever. So it's like, yes, they wanted to condemn us, but the real, like, high fives and everything were about what each other was doing. Oh, you reached out to so and so. Oh, did you see that this professor posted? Wow, great for that. It's like that. And then the professor would get on and say, yeah, I'm with you, and everything. And it's like, whoa, my own peers are doing this. And like, this is again to the point. It's like anybody will join in when they think it's going to make them more popular. And what did the pandemic do to this, right? Like, how do people establish a camaraderie and feel like they're part of something when what they're part of is like being worried that there's death and destruction coming, or that they don't, they can't really see friends or whatever. I mean, you know, so I was really amazed when I went back and looked at it, because I felt very much like it was about me and my students. But now when I go back, I'm like, maybe not as much, which I don't know, in a weird kind of way, maybe makes me feel better. It
Yeah,
doesn't change anything, but
no. Yeah. No, it's so, that makes it's such a fascinating observation because you're right. It doesn't change anything. And I always, I hope that other people that, because I've been in contact with a lot of mostly female scholars who have been canceled, right? And I try to even sometimes send them emails just about like, hey, this should make you feel better. And for lack of, I mean, maybe this is uncouth to say, but yeah, a lot of people lost their minds during Corona. I mean, that's very, I don't mean to be flippant, but there was some serious, global, social, emotional stuff, for lack of a better for a
right.
G-rated word to use, you know. And yeah, that is, I like to believe, even from my research, and I don't have any evidence of this. I like to believe some people feel really guilty about what happened.
Yeah, I
I
would
like to
like to.
believe. Maybe I'm a naive optimist,
Yeah, yeah.
but
I'd like to hear from a few of those people if they're out. Hello, if you're out there, I would like to hear that. So, did you find that kind of, I mean, your research is very different in topic. So, talk about your 4chan research and what the kind of relationship stuff that you saw.
So one of the things, so we have a short piece published with me and a few co-authors have a short piece published with Amsterdam. The University of Amsterdam has something called the Digital Methods Initiative, and they do data sprints. I guess I'm low key plugging for them, but if anyone's interested in digital scholarship at any level of, really, I don't even know if you have to be an academic. Any level of person, journalist, any level of student, I mean, can generally do it, a graduate and above, more or less. But it's a great program, and I had gone a few times in my early PhD, and that's where this research came out of. And so one of the things, so because I say all that to say the work, we didn't get to publish as much as we would like to have, right? And it was defaced once. At one point,
Oh,
someone had hacked it. 4chan, someone, I don't want to say, but someone invested in it, actually pulled the work down, and from what I understood, replaced it with a picture of large male genitals. Yeah. So the work was defaced. It has gone back up. And as I mentioned, it still is public to this day. And I said, we can link it after. What's most interesting about it being linked actually is if you don't read my article, and it's short, but what's really interesting is the 7 or 8 comments from 4chan users, because they had this research institute had worked with on 4chan before, and there had been some interaction between. I'd seen this institute's research critiqued on 4chan by 4chan users, interestingly, right? So there is so just to say, when you said relational, I just want to, it is an interesting relationship between
yeah,
4chan
that's a
and
whole different
scholars,
level of
right?
relationship. Yeah, yeah.
But on the level of individual users, as I mentioned, we learned, and I've never been able to get this out in print because it was hard to prove from the data we had, but I truly believe this. Um, on 4chan, even though it's anonymous, you can select a country flag. It doesn't have to be your country flag. You can select any flag, including a pirate flag. And we realized someone was trying to, with different sets of our data, someone was trying to make a visual. And they had mentioned to me, hey, there's a lot of Portuguese flags here, which is interesting. I mean, just interesting geographically, but I didn't think it meant anything. Well, once I started looking at and again, I went through maybe 30, 40, 50,000 posts to sort of figure this out. There was someone who everyone was actually, I haven't used his name in a long time, but there was a user who was known as Portubro. And he
Okay,
was known as that because on Poll, the thing that both Stringini was focusing on and we were focusing on, he was known as the user who uses a Portuguese flag.
okay,
Right. Now, what fascinates me about this is one day he gets into a small verbal altercation with someone. I see this in the archive. And they start telling things they know about him. He lives in the Northeast. He has 3 kids. They don't know who he is and stuff. But and the person says, we've been posting at each other for years, Portubro. And so this notion of so it's not so anonymous as it's maybe pseudo anonymous, right? But this sort of, to your point about people patting each other on the back for their misdeeds towards others, this status happens on 4chan. There is, even in anonymous internet sites, there's a status, I don't know, status hierarchy, and so relationally, these people know each other in some right now. As another interesting point, there was also a quote unquote, I'm misquoting, but basically there was someone else who used a Portuguese flag, but he was was from somewhere in Europe, because they could tell, they knew based on the time when people posted. They're very astute. They do a lot of
Right.
legwork, a lot of
Well,
legwork.
yeah, this is psychology, right? Like this is what we do with our, with our cognitive resources is we try to sort
Right.
into categories and it's like who's safe and who's not safe, or what's safe and what's not safe, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not necessary. We do it automatically. Like
Mhm.
it's part of our, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's this weird sort of relationships between these people on the site, and they brag about, so what we researched was they were trying to maintain a certain post, because another architectural thing about 4chan, the reason people say it's ephemeral is once a thread hits 300 posts, it like closes and disappears from the sub thread. There can only be, I think, sorry, this is this work's a little ancient for me. I think there can only be 300 total threads, 10 pages of, 10 pages of 30. I apologize, it's 200 or 300. It's in my research, but all that to say, and then after that it drops off technically forever, but not. It goes to the archive.
Right.
And so the users we studied, what they wanted to do was make sure that a thread about President Trump was always on top of all the 200 threads. When you post on a thread, it goes to the top. So the way to keep it at the top is you just keep, but you got to play games with the 300, because eventually the thread will disappear, right?
Right.
So our users that we studied worked in shifts to keep this going, and then bragged about it.
Right.
There was also a lot of sort of misleading. They had a lot of red herrings. They were leaving. There's a lot of like joking around. I don't know. There's a term Whitney Phillips used, but there's like a lot of screwing around on, right? So there's like mythos that are fake, and so they try to pretend that there's this whole. They call themselves the Order of the Bakers, the Bakers Guild, and there's all these people. I mean, I think it was probably about 8 people, but they make it seem like there was like hundreds of people.
Yeah.
But all that to say, they work in shifts, and they sort of coordinate. The coordination was fascinating, and again, this is all public if you know how to see it, which was interesting to me.
Yeah. So, so again, they're like, it's partly or maybe mostly about the game, right? Of keeping things at the top. So we find something, and I mean, maybe we don't care about it that much, but we find something that we care about enough, but then we start caring about the game.
Yes.
Maybe far more than it's, and I think about like social media, other kinds, like they track, like I can't remember which one, but it was like, oh, you don't drop the chain, like you got to keep it going, because it's like, oh, you've interacted with this person, every this
Snap.
don't
I think it's Snapchat. Yeah.
Snapchat. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, it's just another way to keep people going,
Yeah.
right? My Apple Watch does the same thing. It's like, oh, great day yesterday, keep it up today. It's the same. And now that's just competing with me,
Right.
but it's playing into our, again, our psyche, right? Our
Yep.
psychology, our
Yep.
social needs and desires to feel connected with people. And now, was your research essentially sort of, it would have been pre-pandemic. Was it during the first run of presidency or second run for president? Like his
It was midway through his presidency, and I'm thinking about your notion of game, like the gaming, like what are these users, and what are all, again, I don't mean to, they're not different. I don't mean to like say, but they're not different than us, right? And I'm not saying
Right.
you're situating them that way, but I like to remind, maybe it's my own bias because my research academics. I like to remind academics we are absolutely all human too, right?
Yes.
I mean, I apologize. Now I forgot what I was gonna. I
This
forgot how. Oh, right,
gamification.
right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, it all blends together, right? There's but sorry, the interesting part about keeping the Trump. Sorry, to answer your question, it was 2018-ish, so it was midway through for his first presidency.
Okay. So it was pre-pandemic.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
And the
Okay.
stated goal. Oh, you're the stated goal of the people who were making these threads hit the top was they wanted to maintain an accurate media, because it was a bunch of links. It was just like every link that everywhere Trump was that day, there would be a link to a video. It was just it was like a meticulous recreation of his presidency, under the argument of the makers that mainstream media wasn't accurately recounting the presidency. They were trying. I mean, to their credit, and I don't know. And again, I think the game adds to how much it's up the stakes for them, right? Like, I don't know how altruistic did they even care about maintaining? I don't know, right? But that was their stated purpose. They were adamant that their goal was a historical record of the Trump presidency. And, people act like, again, people probably said, oh, well, 4chan's ephemeral. But like I said, it's not. The archive forever. I mean, you and I could go do this. You and I could go poke through those posts now. They're in the archive, unless it's been deleted or something in the last 3 years. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was pre-pandemic, early Trump mid-Trump first term president.
Yeah. I just, who knows where the line is, right? But just think about, like, where we are in terms of, an academic career or whatever, right? Like, we care about our research, and we also care about playing the game that's going to get us, tenure or a better job or a fellowship or a whatever. So it isn't that we don't care about our research. We're just also thinking about the game and that's would be true in any industry. It's not just about being an academic, it's any industry. So do I care about, whatever the books, for my department, or what, the profit and loss, the accounting statements for my department? Yes, I do care about those. And, by, sort of showcasing how good I am at that, I'm going to play the game and maybe get a promotion or whatever. So this is all, it's, again, like you said, it's not to suggest that this is special or unique to 4chan, but it's just, again, it's sort of focusing away from the target. It's not all about the target. It may not all have been about Donald Trump, or it wasn't all about me, even though it felt like it was all about me and my students and some of the people that you've written about and stuff, that there's also this other thing going on. And I think that we have blamed, I know I'm guilty of this, said, oh, virtue signaling. They were all about the virtue signaling. They had to show how, and now I'm like, I don't even know if they even cared about that. It's like, and I don't know. I mean, do you think that the people that you research, do you think that they cared about virtue signaling? Do you think, I don't know.
So I absolutely want to answer that. And I want to make one interesting point about 4chan that speaks to, us as academic vocation. 4chan historically, I've been in grad school a long time. And so I remember that 15 years ago, 4chan was an enfant terrible that the academics loved because it birthed Anonymous, which went after Scientology, among other. Some of the early Anonymous, which was like a sort of like a hacktivist, you don't hear the name anymore at all, but it was sort of like a hacktivist group that they had no leadership. It was horizontal, so their politics were all over the place, right? They were at war with the Church of Scientology years ago because they felt they were taking advantage of people and financial church, the ability, right? They've had they had some Me Too, like supportive Me Too stuff. But on the other hand, I guarantee you they've done misogynistic, horrible. I mean, that is the point. That's part of the lulls that I mentioned earlier. That's actually where that comes from. Is this sort of, it's a chaos ethos. I don't know. It's just chaos, right? So that I just think is worth mentioning, because talking about academics gaming, right? 4chan was great, and then we hated it. And again, I understand that there's a lot of reasons why people have a lot of problems with 4chan. The language is terrible, though, to the point about gaming, I've argued this before, and I sort of debated about this with Whitney Phillips when she gave a talk in Amsterdam. I think a lot of the racism and homophobia is also play acting game. You asked about virtue signaling. I actually, if I may, but I think it's interesting to talk about the idea of negative or anti-virtue signaling. I don't know what I can say on this. The FAG word, I don't know, that word is very common in the discourse on 4chan, but not about gay people, right? Like it's added as a suffix to a lot of words. If you're new to the site, you're a new. Can I say that word?
Yeah, I mean,
you're a new.
It's a podcast.
Okay, I don't want to get demonetized. I don't know.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of podcasts that can't say words, right? So you'd be called an old fag if you were there a long time. A new fag.
Okay.
Fag became and again, I feel very comfortable talking about this as a gay man. I know a lot of scholars won't go into this, but I always do this with my students. I do this lesson with my students to just that fag was a suffix that's heavily used on 4chan. it wasn't about hating gay people. Yeah, you shouldn't use homophobic slurs, fine, but we can have a conversation above that level, right? And in that way, they don't. It's a play act, right? I mean, do I think it's good that these terms get thrown around? Probably not, right? And there are worse, racial slurs that I won't repeat, right? So there's a play acting there. I don't know. You really take bring it going back to the idea of gaming. There's this play act that happens, this play, and so I probably didn't answer your question.
Well, well, I was wondering, when in the research that you did on the academics, that you did for your dissertation, did you find I mean, can you look back now and see sort of this gamification going on, or do you think that it was legitimate legitimate, or do you think it was more about the virtue signaling? Can you see aspects of all of those?
Right. I mean, yeah, I think there's definitely a mix, right? Though I will say I was really, and I'm still haunted by this. One of my case studies was really strong in data. Like the amount of data was just, there was so much. And I think I might have talked to this even before when I did the ILV talk. The public-private divide is wild to me. People would write, people who would chastise the philosopher I was talking about in case one, would privately write to others saying, "Oh, it's terrible what's happening to her." And for me, I can only understand that as the gamification of our job, of a scholarship, right? I don't know how else to see that. On the other hand, there are diehards who truly believe, and I say this flippantly, and I mean I don't have a lot of respect. I don't know, I shouldn't say this, but some people think it's like 1955 all the time, and we are still. And again, 1955 was not a good time. I'm a gay man, right? McCarthyism. I make no bones that, right, but I appreciate the advances of the last 60 years and acknowledge that there's still things to change in the world. But and so all that to say, I guess I respect the fervency of a diehard, but the problem is those people are, again, in your case, those people are targeting absolutely the wrong people. I mean, that came up in my research. You have people saying, there's a sociologist named Susanna Danuta Walters who defended one of my cancel targets, one of the philosophers targeted by an online mob, and she said, with all that's going on in the world, if you're sort of left wing oriented, and during a Trump presidency, because this case also happened during the first Trump presidency, she said, with all that's going on in the world, if you think a left wing philosopher who was trying to say, hey, gender non-conformity is totally normal, if that's who you think your target is, you've lost the plot.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point, it is a mix. To answer your question, it's a mix. There are diehard believers who, again, I respect the conviction, but also not the methods or the means.
Right.
So that's it. I mean, it's not appropriate to peers or anyone. No one should be targeted, period. But colleagues, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So to that point, one of the things that brought us to this forum today was this little part of this article, which is concern trolling. So you said I'd never heard that term. You said you'd never heard that term. Just, I did do some, poking around to see if it appears in the literature elsewhere. I mean, I found it one or two places, just similarly, just sort of a small little reference, but I couldn't find anything. So here there's something for you to write about, and it only appears in this article, just very briefly in 2 paragraphs.
Right.
But it really resonated with me also, because the way that they describe it is it's a hook, right? So this is what happened to me. A student took a screenshot of a single question on a survey. They had received an orientation to research, signed up for a research platform, chose a study, received an email, clicked on the link in the email, read a consent document, and then answered, about 100 questions. So this is not a naive subject, okay? And the participant was in the Department of Psychology, so in a psychology course. Okay. So this is not a naive subject who just sort of randomly got this bizarre question. There were 100 questions on the survey. So they post a screenshot and say that they're concerned about this. Does this look racist to you? Right. And then another person says, oh, is this what people are researching at this university? So this, it's sort of like it starts out as a concern, right? And if you don't answer that concern as a, I didn't even see it until, not following the university social media account. Um, but if the university doesn't respond, that's wrong. And if they do respond, it may be wrong because it may be a concern troll, right? Not an actual concern. And one of the things that they mention in this little article, amongst those two paragraphs, is that universities in particular may be especially unprepared to deal with a concern troll. And so anyway, uh, that was what resonated with me,
Yeah.
was that's how it started with me.
Yeah, so I want to be very careful speaking here, but I am very familiar with a situation that happened similar to yours. It was actually over a survey question, and I guess actually, if you're willing to say a little more, I'd be curious to know about this. In the case that I'm familiar with, it was a it might have been someone taking the survey. Don't quote me. Like a survey. Sorry, I'm not a quantitative scholar. Can you
Yeah,
tell?
yeah.
But the person tweeted it. It ended up online, but the PI quickly caught and responded.
Mm.
Um, and now I just want to say, I don't mean to get into this anecdote. There's two things I want to say with that. One, so I would be curious to hear. I don't know. I just to say that when the PI responded, they tried to nip it in the bud, as though, as you mentioned, you're not following social media, right? But I also would say, as a point of disciplining, I learned the hard way. I immediately went to bat for that PI, not expecting them to fold to internet pressure over a survey question on which this person is an extremely published scholar. I mean, just like you. Again, I say that as someone who's a young career scholar, and so while I would still stand up for scholars and still do, I learned a hard lesson in that I was defending you publicly just 12 hours for you to fold, right? Not you generally. I'm sorry, this person.
Not
So
not me, but
right, exactly. Yeah, sorry. I
yeah,
just want to make sure everyone understands
yeah,
what I'm saying on the
yeah,
podcast.
yeah.
So I don't know. I just to hear you.
So
That
that researcher did just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked that research question," or something like that.
went above and beyond publicly, privately at the university, within their school at the university, tweeted, yeah, and most horrifying to me, changed the work, changed the research.
Wow.
And I will admit, it was about a Likert scale. It was the claim. I'm not saying it was concern trolling, but the claim didn't have a lot of intellectual heft. If you want my very
Right.
biased,
Which the one against me
that's
neither.
that's what
Also, yeah.
that's why when you said that, I realized I don't know if I've even mentioned this to you in the times we've spoken, but I have a very I watched that, and like I said, I've gotten burned. I defended someone who I thought deserved to be defended. And again, I understand why people do what they do. I have no animosity, but as a young career scholar, putting my neck on the line for a full tenured scholar who then, again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but turned tail, and just
Right.
kind of, it was so again, do you, may I ask, do you think things would you have responded? Can I ask, just if you don't mind speaking, in terms of response, what were your thoughts? Or would you have,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
So, I mean, my response to the university, so like my department chair, so I got a phone call at like 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, on Monday morning, and said, you're in trouble, basically. And my department chair just, I mean, no one at my university stood up. Nobody anywhere stood up. Except the College Fix actually wrote a little blurb and said that they thought it was stupid. The whole thing was ridiculous and inappropriate. But basically nobody, like at my university, nobody stood up. I did get a couple of like private emails, but not even really to speak of. Um, so, it never I luckily I started sending out email. I got an all campus email went out calling us an example of white supremacy culture from an entire department, and a department, and and the university president sent out multiple um all campus, all constituents, so all stakeholders, to alumni, everything, apologizing for us. Okay, so there was no, like, my students actually wanted to engage. They were like, oh, in their naivete, they were like, oh, if we just explain it, they'll understand. And I'm like, no, I got news for you. They do understand, and they don't care. The people that should be helping us, the people, the dean of students, the provost, the
Right.
president of the university, those are people who should be, they do understand. Those people are academics, they do get it, and they don't care. My students really, they held the line, and I held the line, and we just said, we don't apologize for sound research design. This was an experiment. These were not people this was not something we posted. This was, this is not our personal opinion. And there's no way that anyone who's participating in a survey, who did all the things that they had to do, and they had to deliberately misunderstand. There's no accidental misunderstanding.
Right.
However, a university official said to us, those students, so we'll assume that she meant minority students of color, don't understand the difference between a survey and reality. Yes.
Wow. In case you're on the podcast and couldn't see the face I just made, I want everyone to know the face I
Yeah.
just made. I'm sure
Yeah.
you all did as well.
But we're the racists.
Right. Of course. Oh, yeah, right.
For studying rhetoric. And my students, by the way, the day before, so I got the phone call at 7:00 in the morning on a Monday morning. On Sunday night, the Association for Psychological Science just dropped an article about my research students and the good work that they were doing for social justice. So that was like 12 hours before, and then there we are. So we honestly believed that people were going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you found that in your research too, that it's like, well, this is dumb. People are going to figure this out. My colleagues, my friends on campus, my cowork, people that I was the institutional review board chair, like, people are going to figure this out, right? And again, I had to explain. It's like, oh no, it turns out they figured it out all along. They just didn't care. And so for them, the game was, let's show how anti-racist this university is, right? So it's just figuring out the game. Like, after I read this chapter, I'm like, or this book, basically, it's like, I just have to figure out what game they're playing. And they're playing the game that we have to show how anti-racist this university is. And we need a scapegoat.
Right.
We need oh, look, she just flung herself on the sword. Right. For us to, and it's like, isn't that, convenient for us? Yeah. So yeah, I don't think it would have mattered, because I think they were so desperate to play the game that I don't think it would have mattered at all. And I'm pretty sure that for the most part, in fact, we did a podcast on a research study where they kind of tracked like what people did, and apologies made no difference whatsoever. It didn't help. Now, there's certainly a body of apology research on sort of accidents and medical malpractice and stuff that indicates that apologies do help to mend relationships, and to lower the temperature on legal proceedings and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's much to be said. Now, Helen Pluckrose of Counterweight and Fire took sort of like held my hand, and did what they could to sort of prop me up and keep and so I kept my job. Right. But I do and even today, the way that things are framed, I just had a meeting a couple months ago, May, I think, with my academic dean, who just basically said, well, I shouldn't say basically, who said, well, if you would be willing to apologize. It would help to mend the relationships in the department. So it was like his real concern, in theory, is like, oh, the relationships in the department are strained. And
Yeah.
so, Elizabeth, if you would make this effort, then, wouldn't you be glad that your department was happier? And I'm like, you're mistaking me for someone who cares about my department. Like, am I actively trying to undermine my department? No, but I have no, like, I don't feel an attachment anymore. And so I don't care. I don't care if they don't like me. They're the ones, they said they don't like me.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well,
I'm not begging for, yeah, this is, yeah.
Yeah. So under the auspices, of concern. So we start with concern, and then even still today, I got called out of my classroom in the spring semester by an adjunct professor while I was teaching. An adjunct professor called me out of the classroom, and standing right in front of the door so the students could see, said, I just can't believe how little you care about our students. An adjunct. Now, where does she get the chutzpah, I guess,
Yeah.
if you will, to basically tell me that I don't care and that she's concerned? Well, she gets it from the other faculty members,
Yeah.
right? She feels so empowered
Right.
through this sort of concern about, students and that kind of thing, that she can call me out of a classroom and berate me in front of students in the middle of my class. So this sort of idea of concern trolling also doesn't go away, right?
Right.
They have to keep, that's the game they need to keep playing, because otherwise the narrative, the story of what they did doesn't make sense anymore.
Right. Yeah. And there's a scholar who argued too that, cancel culture in academe is a way of gaining vocational status. And so when you said adjunct, not only is it shocking for a whole different reason, and not because I'm basically not even an adjunct, like not because of your distinction, but just because you mentioned that she's not even someone, that person's not even at your faculty meetings, and that's not even,
Right.
that's a contract colleague. And again, I've been an adjunct my whole life. I respect adjuncts. This is not a shot across the bow at adjuncts. It's a shot across the bow at anyone who would pull anyone out of class to berate them, and you know what I mean? Right. my target is clear here. That's unfathomable. But like I said, there's been a little bit, and I mean, I gestured this in my own work. There is a vocational bonus for having the right politics and attacking someone who is presumed to have the wrong, not even
Right.
politics, position on an issue.
Right.
You know, she can
Yeah,
tell.
and again, they don't know my position. I mean, they're presuming,
Right.
Again, because they, are purposely misunderstanding. So, yeah. So I thought that, so I guess we should, I said concern trolling. So what happens? People express what looks like a legitimate concern about usually a sensitive topic, and the goal is to bait the person or the organization or whatever into responding, and how hard this is, to identify. And I see this again. I mean, the book is very right wing, sort of like, neo Nazis, people like, didn't totally understand the whole auctioning off of women chapter, because there were no women actually auctioned. I guess it was just like fake. It was pictures of real people. I don't know. But anyway, some of this is really extreme behavior described in the book. But and we've been talking about it, from the left, because that's when your research was done, that's when I was canceled. But now we're seeing it circle back. We're seeing the circle back, where now it's sort of the right wing politicians who are using this concern trolling. They also call it what, there's, sort of like there's a chess move that this is called, right? Where you, like, um, I don't know. Anyway, so I don't play chess either. So but this idea of, well, don't you care about, so that like I get, conservatives say to me, well, you've been canceled, don't you care that we need to, you know get change the university scholars, like get rid of DEI, and do all this stuff and everything. And it's like, well, yeah, I care about viewpoint diversity.
Mhm.
Oh, well, then you have to be with us, you have to come over. It's like, no.
Right.
But there is this kind of version of it, right? And the maligning of character and stuff, I think, more for the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we want to win, we want to win against Harvard, we want to win against, they don't, I don't think most people really know what's being taught at Harvard or
Right.
Columbia or whatever. So it is more to sort of like keep it at the top of the of the 4chan thing. It's like we got to keep that in the conversation. And there's a lot of game playing in terms of that, like, oh, we'll dismiss Congress, so we'll hopefully stop talking about that and start talking about something else. So we are seeing this manifest not just online but in real time, now, from, I think, from the current administration. And
Yeah.
and I think that if you were concerned about left wing extremism, and you're not concerned about right wing extremism now, that you're not self reflecting very much.
No, I
Because,
agree completely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the term selective outrage has gotten thrown around a lot. I think it's a right wing term critiquing the left. But I got to be honest with you. That's really, after years of all that, that's where I've come to. It is right to be upset about both. Right. Like I say all the time, I wanted, because of my research in higher education, I've looked for severe changes in academia.
right.
But the last person I wanted doing it, with all due respect, was President Donald Trump and some of the people he's chosen to do so. Right. People that, the NIH post to Jay Bhattacharya, I think he got an unfair deal at Stanford. I'm not that type of scholar, but I think he got an unfair deal at Stanford during Corona. But otherwise,
Right.
yeah, some of the people that, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to throw your lot in with anyone, and both sides. To your point, I think, a lot of people say, well, this happened to you, you should be with us. It's like, I have no camp. You know what I mean? I'm
Right.
sort of here for, at the risk of liberal, but I'm here for liberal values,
Right.
enlightenment processes. There are problems with the Enlightenment, and we should take into account those. But feminist views of Enlightenment is great, right? Or like, gay, queer critique of Enlightenment. There's important critiques of Enlightenment, but at the end of the day, I'm a universalist in that way, right? While acknowledging that there are distinctions between all, this isn't some, yeah, so that's where I fall, right? But it's hard to fall into the camps. I often, because my work is vaguely, aggressively critical of academia, I'm assumed to be right wing, and that's,
Yes.
it just doesn't fit me. I mean, I have a paper out called from fag rag to Pornhub: Adventures in Gay Queer Description. Avatar of the right, I am not. Right.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize the left as well. I don't, like you
Yeah.
said,
It's
it
the
is.
behavior, it's the game of that kind of thing that deserves criticism.
Yes.
And I personally can't now, especially now, can't really listen to your ideas when it is filled with sort of this, these social processes of online hate, like the title of the book, right? Like it's distracting from the message. And you and I can sit here and explain the human behavior aspects of it, the psychology of it, the sociology of it, and yet I still can't, I can't hear the message through that, through the hate, through the virtue signaling, whatever it is that we
Right.
choose to call it. I can't hear through that. And so I don't, whichever direction it's coming from.
Exactly. Yep.
And so a couple of terms that this book, other terms that this book used that I thought was interesting was digital campfires. And I sort of, that sort of resonated with me, like people sitting around sort of, again, like especially in, during COVID or whatever, kind of like, hanging out digitally and,
Yeah.
stoking the fire, right?
Right.
Stoking the
Right.
fires. A subculture literacy. And that's where you're talking about sort of in 4chan, these creation of words and terms that create a subculture, like only we know what these words mean.
Right.
And so we're special because we have this special, like pig Latin when we were kids,
Right.
right? We have this special thing, and it binds people together. So this, again, it's what I'm interested in language and metaphor and the way that people use, language. So that interested me also, and you talked about it, this sort of subculture literacy, subculture language that bonds people and makes them special.
Right.
Yeah. And then also the hate parties. I said,
Yeah.
the hate parties, and digitally mediated spillover, and that reminded me of like spreading activation in your brain, right? Only this is spreading activation across the cross posting of. So we're on 4chan now, but we're going to go to our Facebook group. We're going to go to these other, kinds of things again to keep it going, right? To recruit new, new people into, to get the thumbs up from people outside, and then we can report to our inside people. I got some, I went over to my group and people liked what we did or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So these were all sort of things, and again, things that we see from cancel culture on the left. And now that we're seeing, sort of on the right, the sort of creation, on the extreme right,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
creation of digital campfires, in unique. This is a special platform just for us, and subculture literacy, defining new terms and creating things, and again, then this sort of spreading activation. So there's a lot. This is really, I mean, I think this book was worth reading. Um, I skimmed some of it. I read other parts of it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not every piece of it was not, for me, but it was it was helpful to me as a canceled person. Um, so I mean, I would recommend it to a canceled person.
You mean a person of cancellation?
Yeah, exactly.
POC, as it
Yeah,
were.
yeah, and
No, yeah. And Elizabeth did mention early on, the book is super right wing focused, but it's not. It's not. It doesn't feel preachy because I am also. That's my personal trigger, right? I mean, I don't know. It is interesting to learn about Stormfront, which is like the neo-Nazi, right? I think a corollary text, and we can link this in the notes later, is Angela Nagel's "Kill All Normies," because she really goes into the left and right. She criticizes Tumblr, she criticizes 4chan. She's sort of uncancelable because she has no social media presence. They try to cancel her, and she has a PhD out of, I think, Dublin. But yeah, I agree with you completely. There's a lot of use. I mean, I will admit, I almost feel like a bad scholar. I didn't include this in my dissertation, and there are some interesting ideas here that I touch on that they have the language for that I wish I had maybe done a better lit review. Oops, but
yeah. Well, that's why they had to get their edited book, because all of these people had published, but I think in sort of like maybe like lower key journals
yeah,
that weren't
yeah,
as easy to, maybe because they weren't, um, you know, uh, their their research maybe wasn't easily understood. Like I've seen other research on, say, Reddit and that kind of stuff, and it's complicated to read.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very difficult because they're so focused on how did they get the data and how did they analyze it, and everything, that it's hard
yeah,
to understand. And so that's the other thing, is I thought most of these chapters, most of these authors did a good job of writing, a book that wasn't just for academics, that
yeah,
it sort of bridges the gap. I wouldn't say it's totally a Barnes and Noble or whatever special. It's kind of, but your public library might have this book. And it's available, right? It's open access.
Yeah, I believe I found my copy PDF. Like I think I Google searched it. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to.
So we can link, we can put the information, and then people may be able to get it and skim it for themselves. So
Yeah,
I really appreciate you talking to me about this.
thank you.
And,
Yeah, thank
well,
you so much for having me. This was amazing.
and hopefully we'll have you back.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening. Please consider donating to the Institute for Liberal Values, a 501c3 nonprofit organization at ilvalues.org. All donations go to support our continued programming to realize our mission to provide the skills and support required to build community where there has been division, to encourage free expression where there has been censorship, and to foster optimism where there is fear.